Greetings and salutations to all of you lovely, fluffy, non-fluffy, equally lovely and beautiful listeners out there. I apparently can't do proper counting because I said the last episode was like episode 50, but upon post-production I realized it was like episode 47, so I got a little ahead of myself on the last episode, but you know what? We're almost to 50, so I'm going to call that a victory early, so. But I think we're going to make it. I think we'll make it. I believe in us for making it to that point. So, how's it going? How are ya? How is life? It has been a hot one for the past, give or take, a few days. It's been probably somewhere around, okay, if I want to do the metric system, like 36 Celsius, thereabout, in my area, and if we're talking Fahrenheit, that's like 95 or so, somewhere in the neighborhood of the mid-90s in Fahrenheit, if not more, but, yeah, I'm working on my conversions, so I hope that you appreciated that. I also have actual notes for this podcast I just want to point out, and Archie is sitting here on my lap currently trying to chew on the microphone wire, so if you hear anything weird, that is just him trying to steal the show, as always. So he's looking at me right now like, he needs some airtime, but he never talks. I do wonder myself if Archie could talk, what would he say? Let me know in the comments. What would Archie say if he could talk? I'm curious about your guys' takes on that. But it's been a fairly decent week. Work has been kicking my butt because it's been so hot. But yeah, I've been basically getting up, going to work, working my tail off, and then coming home and like falling asleep for about an hour because not necessarily heat exhaustion, it's just regular exhaustion from exuding so much energy from sweating and running around all day because my job is very labor intense, as a lot of you know. And yeah, I'm still trying to keep it going, as much as possible. But I've decided to turn this into a challenge. So, as many of you know, next week, which I can't believe it's already a week from now, next week is Anthrocon, which I can't believe I can actually say that. Like, literally a week from tomorrow is Anthrocon, and tomorrow being Thursday, as I'm recording this on Wednesday night. But yeah, that's unbelievable to even think about. Like, I'm ready, but at the same time, I don't feel ready because there's still so much I have to do. I got to clean the rest of my suit. I got to do some laundry, and I got to pack, and I'll be welcoming some very lovely guests into my home next Monday because they will be coming in from jolly old England. Yes. So I'll be hosting them for the next few weeks after the con, and this will be their first furry convention that they'll ever be attending, and good on them for attending one of the largest cons in the world at the moment. Not furry cons, I should clarify, but because there's cons out there that are way, way bigger. But anyway, so that's going to happen this coming week. But as I was saying, I've turned this week of heat and sweating and running around into fursuit training. I'm definitely no stranger, as many people have pointed out to me, to fursuiting for very long periods of time. I've discussed it before that my top record for suiting entirely is about 10 hours and 41 minutes. I believe that's my current time that I'm sitting on for the amount of time I fursuited straight, and that does include water breaks, so I just want to point that out. It's not 10 hours and 41 minutes of like, not taking breaks or any water. No, I'm not stupid. I'm going to partake in water because my body needs that. Because when you suit for 10 plus hours, your body tends to lose a lot of fluids. So keep up on the fluids if you plan to be a marathon suiter like that. But anyway, so this week has been a challenge of sorts, kind of training myself to full suit and suit in general in the very hot summer of Pittsburgh next week during 4th of July weekend, and I'm excited. I'm ready. I'm feeling pretty prepared for the the very real realities of, that's redundant, the realities of a hot spring in the middle of Pittsburgh, and I am the hot spring, in fact. So that's gonna be fun. I'm excited. It's my favorite convention of all time, as many of you know. Even though I do have a few words for Anthrocon, as many of you have heard before, right? Yeah. So as it stands right now, I'm still not happy with Anthrocon's decision as far as like the fursuit parade is concerned. I have not seen any updates or amendments or addendums or anything to their so-called rules, but yeah, I just decided, hey, we have the fursuit block party, so I'm not gonna lose any sleep over it. It's a dumb thing, yes, but what can you do? At the end of the day, they're gonna do what they're gonna do. They're gonna decide whatever they're gonna decide, and we can voice our opinions on social media all we want, but at the end of the day, it's gonna happen the way that they see fit, and that is the unfortunate part. But I'm just hoping, with enough noise, we have about a week out, I'm hoping with enough noise that they will be able to be like, all right, well, we can make exceptions. So we'll see what happens. But so yeah, that's next week. Anthrocon's coming up. I'm really excited. Just a quick advancement. Just in case I don't get a podcast episode out next week, you know why. It's because I will be in Pittsburgh. So yeah. Just a fair warning, it may be 2 weeks for the next podcast, so my apologies in advance if that is the case. But as I was saying, I do have notes for this podcast, and I want to start this off by talking about something very peculiar that happened at work today. And this story caters to a very specific sect of the furry fandom. Even though it's not like completely, it's its own thing. Okay, it just happens to intermingle with furry fandom a lot of times. So you'll understand what I'm saying here in a second. But okay, here we go. So today, I am doing my job like I normally would. I'm just kind of like floating along, blah blah blah. Just this and that. And as many of you know, I work in a warehouse, so there are a lot of moves that tend to happen, and one of those moves is cycle counting. And for those of you who don't know, who don't work in inventory or don't work with a large number of parts, cycle counting is basically what happens when it's how do I explain this? It's when you take a portion of your inventory. It could be, X amount of like individual parts, or like a certain number of things in your warehouse. Like it could be parts, it could be like coils of wire, it could be really anything. It could be machines, depending on what your inventory is based on, right? Could be food items, who knows. But that being said, the warehouse that I work in deals a lot in recycling parts. So my boss comes to me and he says, "Hey, can you follow me for a second?" I'm like, "Sure." And he takes me over to the shelf, and this is going to pay off. Trust me, you're going to be like, "Oh, okay." He takes me to this shelf, and he shows me two different parts. Now, these parts are recycling parts, like I said, but they have to do with, how do I explain this? They are, let's just say they're fabric-based parts, and they attach to another machine part in order to do a very specific job. So the fabric part that we're talking about, one of them is made. Okay, here's where it comes in. You ready? And one of these parts, one of these fabric-based parts that we're looking at, there's two side by side. One of them is made of cloth, and the other one is made of neoprene. Okay, very specific. I think you understand where this is going here. He's looking at him, and he's like, man, I can't tell which one is neoprene. I can't tell. And he's showing them to me. He's like, yeah, can you explain? Maybe you know like this part better than I do, or these two parts better than I do. And I was like, which one is neoprene? And he's like, yeah. And so I point directly to the neoprene. I'm like, trust me, sir, that is neoprene. Sorry. I'm gonna cut that coughing out. I just had a little bit of a coughing fit there, but no, it was like he was literally, we were there. He's like, I can't tell which one of these is neoprene, and I just pointed right to it. Like, there's the neoprene, and I even showed it to him. I'm like, this is neoprene. You can tell it's stretchy, right? And he's like, oh, okay. Thanks for your help. I was like, yeah, no problem. And I walked away, like sweating a little bit, like, oh my gosh, I hope he doesn't ask me how I know that. Okay, so for those of you who don't know what I'm alluding to, just to the regular folks who maybe don't understand what I'm talking about. Generally speaking, there are hoods. There are hoods in the furry fandom. Pup hoods, if you've heard of them before, and I'm sure many of you have. Most often, 99% of the time, are made of neoprene. Like, they're a mixture of neoprene, leather, pleather, silicone, whatever, right? But neoprene is normally the base material for pup hoods. And unmistakably, I can look at a part. I was able to look at that part and go, that is 100% neoprene. There is no question. So walking away from that situation of helping him and being like, sir, that is 100% neoprene, trust me. And part of me in that moment was like, oh my gosh, what if he asks me, how do I know that? And I'm like, oh, please don't ask me how I know, because I am not explaining the answer to you. So that was definitely a highlight, I have to say. The things you learn as a furry and the things that you run across as a furry, like, for another example is, I know the difference between minky and shag fur, right? And I know the difference between, like, for example, digigrade, plantigrade, and all that stuff. And, sometimes these things come up in real life. Sometimes they come up in situations similar to this, where, sir, that is 100% neoprene. There is no question about it. And he's like, oh, okay, thank you. And then that was it. So that's something I'll never forget. And thankfully he didn't question it. He just seemed like, oh, okay, I'm just going to take your word for it. And I'm like, yes, sir, that's what it is. So you're welcome. Happy to help you. I'm not going to tell you how I was able to help you, but I gave you the answer. So I hope you're happy. So that's something I'll never forget. Okay, so look at my notes here. There was something that came up recently. I have two things actually, and this may take up the rest of the podcast time, but they're definitely interesting topics that I want to cover. One of them is, I was approached recently. Usually on Thursday nights, I go to D&D, Dungeons and Dragons, with my friends. We've been running this campaign for a little over a year. I'm a monk halfling, by the way, so pretty awesome. My character's name is Geraldo, for any of you who are curious about the campaign that I'm playing as, like the campaign character I'm playing as, I should say. So, pretty cool. But it was pointed out to me recently that during one of these sessions, we oftentimes will just kind of BS before we start a full-on session, and just small talk, whatever, and we'll make references, we'll show each other memes, and it's a good time before we get serious about our game. So anyway, it was right after Furry Week in Atlanta last month. By that point, I had been to about 6 cons, so Anther New England or Anther Northeast if you're from that area, MCFC, been to TFF, FWA, Anther, Ohio. Yeah, so like the list goes on. But yeah, I've already been to like 6 cons this year, and we're only halfway through the year, which is pretty insane. And somebody in those conversations, and in this conversation in particular, somebody in the room was like, "Oh my gosh, Sammy, you've been to so many cons." I'm like, "Yeah, I have." They were talking this year. "You've been to so many cons this year. That's insane." I'm like, "Yeah, it is absolutely." And then the next question, it was a rhetorical question, but it really caught me off guard. They said point blank out in the open to me, "How are you not broke?" And I honestly was taken aback by that question. Even though it was rhetorical, I was like, "Huh, that's a really good question." But then the other half of my brain kicked in, and I was like, well, I'm not broke because I tend to try to do things the best that I can. Like I budget, I pay things in cash. I don't use credit. I don't have a FICO score or anything like that. So I'm just going to lay this out a little bit to any of you who are financial nerds. But if any of you are out there like, oh, finances, oh, this is going to be great, you might want to hear this. I think you'll appreciate what I'm about to say. So I thought about that question because I've heard this before in my life, but it wasn't so point blank and blatant in a question like this. And I really, the question took me back so much that I actually revisited my own financial plans. It kind of kicked me to the point where I was like, okay, well, maybe I could do better. Maybe there's stuff that I could do. Oh, Archie, what's the matter? He just started meowing for some reason. Why are you yelling at me? I don't know if you guys heard that, but Archie's being a little booger right now. Hey, what's the matter with you? Huh? Why are you angry? So, anyway. So, we interrupt this for a little bit of an Archie time. So, he's trying to attack me at the moment. I don't know why, but so if you'll pardon me whilst I try to deflect his playtime that he's trying to indulge me in at the moment. He's behind me right now, so I don't know what he's planning. Archie, what's the matter? You okay? Hi. Please don't hurt me. I'm so young. Please don't hurt me. I'm gonna have to cut this part out too. Oh my gosh, you're so scary. I didn't do anything to you. I was petting you. Okay, there you go. He's gone. He's good. He's just a little overstimmed at the moment, so sorry about that. Anyway, so what were we talking about? Oh yeah, so revisiting the financial plan. So, I have been debt-free since college, and that is no exaggeration. I have had 0 debts since college, like not even a car payment, okay? I don't use credit cards. I don't have a car payment. I pay rent. I pay my taxes every year. I buy food, and that's really it. Like, other than furry conventions and the like, yeah, I don't have any debt. I paid for college out of pocket. I just went with the monthly payments. They had financing options from the first college and the university that I went to, and that got paid off. Shout out to mom and dad for helping out. Huge collaborative effort. Like, if it wasn't for all of us working together and getting my college paid off, I wouldn't have been able to make it through 0 debt. But I did, and I made my last payment my last semester of college in 2018, and it was a really good feeling. And so ever since then, no debt. The car that I drive, I paid out of pocket. I slapped a check down on the table. I wrote it, and I said, "Give me the car," and they said, "Yes, sir." And I drove it off the lot that day. And as far as I started to talk about credit cards, I have 0 credit cards. The only credit card that is in my wallet is a business travel card for my workplace. I haven't traveled through my workplace in about 3 years. So I never use that, and I can't actually cannot use that for anything unless I'm traveling, and that's very seldom, right? So I have to keep that on me because it is assigned to me and it is company property. So I would rather it not sit elsewhere than my wallet, because if that gets lost, then I'm responsible for it. I don't want to have to pay a big fat fine or anything through my workplace or anything just because I lost a credit card. So, not going to happen on my watch. Anyway, so zero credit cards. I don't have any. Um, I don't have any like perks from anywhere. I don't do any sign-on plans. I don't finance things. If I can't pay for it in full, then I'm not buying it. Um, my car, I've had it for a little over 5 years now, and it still runs great. I keep up on the repairs every few months, and as long as you get the oil changed and you get it checked on occasionally and get what you need fixed, then it is done. It is good. Um, and a lot of what I'm talking about, I haven't really discussed publicly, but this is the time, I think, because it's very relevant, especially in today's age. As I said, I pay for everything with cash. If I don't have the money, I don't buy it. So I have my bank account that I use, and I'm not rich by any means. So, because going back to the statement that person made about how are you not broke? Well, I'm not broke, but I'm not rich either. Okay, I'm a regular citizen who works and pays their bills, pays their taxes, pays their dues, and budgets crazily, albeit crazy, but it's by no means a large amount, if that makes sense. It's livable, it's comfortable, it's enough to get by. I'll say it's enough to survive. And a lot of you might be listening to this thinking, how is this possible? How do you not have a credit card? How do you not, lease or finance your vehicles? How do you, not have any student debt, anything like that? Well, basically it comes down to this. You have to outthink your money. You have to outsmart your own finances, and you have to outsmart yourself, because I will tell you right now, a lot of times people think they have money problems. I'm going to tell you right now, the people who have or feel like they have money problems, it's not a money problem. It is a self problem. I'm going to say that again. You don't have a money problem. You have a self problem. And what do I mean by that? Do I mean that like you spend willy-nilly? Does that mean like, you're irresponsible? No, it's not what that means at all. It means the self problem is you got to change your perspective about your finances. You have to change your mind about your money in order to retain what you have, in order to keep what you have. Okay, so let me give you a bit of a rundown of how I was able to kind of transform how I view my own finances, right? My own financial plans. First thing that I do is I make sure I have $1,000 at all times. Okay, and this is also steps that you can work on for yourself. I make sure I always have $1,000. It doesn't matter what I need. It doesn't matter where I am in life. It doesn't matter if I'm unemployed. It doesn't matter, if I move states or what kind of job I have. I have to have $1,000. Why? Because that $1,000 is going to help in the most dire needs. Car breaks down. You need something replaced on your car. You have let's say a minor medical issue, right? So maybe you need some medical care that, hopefully not too serious, and you can pay for that out of pocket. Maybe you have to move out quick. Maybe you get evicted. You can put down a down payment very quickly on a new place and then replenish that amount if you have a job in like the next month or so, or a couple weeks, right? So that's the first rule, having $1,000 at all times, no matter what. That money does not get touched. Only for emergencies does that money get touched, okay? And then the next step is retain at least 3 to 6 months of living expenses. Once you've had the $1,000, then you retain 3 to 6 months of living expenses. And what does that mean? That is a fully funded, what's called an emergency fund, okay? Fully funded, meaning if you lose your job, if you have to move, if you, say, heaven forbid, you're getting a divorce or something like that, that 3 to 6 months is going to come in handy for rent or mortgage, buying food, maintaining your day-to-day or month-to-month life for 3 to 6 months until you can get things back on track. So that's probably buying a new car, albeit a lemon or a beater, but still, an old beater, or like a temporary car for like $2,000, and at least you have something to drive until you can afford something better, right? Anything can happen in life is really the point of that fully funded emergency fund. 3 to 6 months of expenses, that's your second step, and making sure that you have that at your disposal at all times, right? Now, that's kind of where I land. Is like I'm kind of in that camp of the second step of being in that sort of limbo of 3 to 6 months. So if I were to lose my job tomorrow, if my car were to break down, if I had to move, if I had whatever were to happen to me, I have that 3 to 6 months fund, right, that I can use for that period of time in order to get things back on track, right? So that way it's a bit of a cushion. Think of it like a cushion, right? And it's nice. It really is a nice thing to be able to have at your disposal, depending on the situation. Because like we said, anything can happen. Life can happen. Something breaks, you get a health issue, whatever the case may be. It's good to have that, right? And then the steps go on to like kind of further goals, like pay off your house early, set aside your retirement, have save up for like your future, or like any people in your future that you can leave an inheritance to, that kind of stuff, right? And the steps kind of, they flesh out a little bit more and more as time goes on. And I think the wrap up of this whole blurb of conversation that I've been telling you about for the past like 15 minutes is I'm just letting you know what I do, and I'm not saying that it's the right way. I'm not saying that it is the only way. I'm not saying that this is something that you should do. By all means, do what you're going to do and do what works best for you. Okay? That is my first disclaimer with this. But I was able to answer the question, how are you not broke? Well, I budget. I know how much I'm able to save for a convention. I know how much I'm going to spend, usually before I get there. I do tend to splurge sometimes, whether that's going out to eat, or maybe finding something in the dealer's den that's a couple $100. I'm able to kind of cushion those things a little bit with my finances. And don't get me wrong, I've gotten a little crazy sometimes. Like, I am definitely no stranger to overdoing it, especially for furry conventions, at furry conventions. And if you were to ask me maybe like a few years ago, how are you able to go to so many conventions? I'd be like, I don't know, but I can answer that. It's because I budget before I go. I know how much I'm going to spend on food. I know how much I want to spend for the dealer's den, and I set a hard limit for myself, So registration is this much. Okay, got that covered. Hotel share is going to be this much. I'm going to spend this much on the hotel. Depending on if I'm the room holder or if I'm just staying in the room, that's going to matter, because I got to make sure that these people are going to pay me back, or I have to make sure that I pay my share for that person, whoever is the room holder, okay? And nothing super extra. Like if you want to go out to eat, okay, here's your budget for that. Expect this much you're going to be spending. Maybe you want to have a little bit extra if you want to buy somebody a drink, or maybe you want to pick up somebody's meal. Be nice. Or pick up an appetizer for the table. Set aside a little extra just for that, right? And I will say, some cons are more expensive than others. Like, for example, Midwest Fur Fest tends to be a little bit more expensive because it is in Chicago. Chicago's prices tend to run a little higher. Same with Atlanta. Atlanta prices for FWA, a little bit higher. But other states like my state, Anthro, Ohio, my home state excuse me, Anthro, Ohio, a little bit cheaper because I'm used to the wages here and I'm used to the prices here. Megaplex, Florida, moderately, not too bad in pricing and such. And Anthro New England, or Anthro Northeast, A&E, was a little bit more expensive than I expected, but it's also Boston, so that kind of made sense. Although I did get a pretty good deal on a hotel room during that con, so I can't complain. So also fun, like hunting for deals, looking for coupons, that kind of stuff, and do not go over budget no matter what. Okay, and like I said, I've been the person to splurge before. I'll probably do it again in the future, no question, but don't go crazy, okay? Don't go too overdrawn on your bank account. In fact, don't overdraw at all on your bank account. And when you come home, you realize, hey, I still got money. I'm good, or, and the scenario of like the emergency funds, right? If I were to drive to a convention, if my car were to break down, then I'm able to fix it. That's what that $1,000 is there for, right? Heaven forbid I'm driving home from Chicago or from Atlanta or from Boston. Something happens, let's say in Pennsylvania, to my car, and I need to get a hotel room for the night. I got myself covered. I can use part of that $1,000 to repair my car and also get a hotel room. No big deal. Then replenish it the next paycheck or whatever, right? So that's really it, answered. That is how I'm able to stay afloat and still go to these furry conventions. Now, I also want to mention, I don't advise going too crazy with furry conventions either. Yes, I go to a lot of conventions year to year, but that's simply because I can afford it. I have the time off at my work, and I can afford it, and I'm able to do it. So, if do not take this advice and think that, oh, I can do what Samson does. No, do it within your means. If you can only make, like, let's say 3 cons a year, go for it. But do not, and I repeat, do not overdo it on yourself. Do not overdraw just to go to a furry convention. Do not go into debt because of a furry convention, because of a suit, or anything like that. Like, I've seen people, they take out so much on credit, and they take out so much that they can't afford on a fursuit. I've seen it before, and I've seen people go near bankrupt because of a fursuit, and or whatever, or a trip, or and honestly, at that point, it's not worth it. Okay, if you're down in the dumps, if you can't afford to go to a convention or get a fursuit or whatever, please do not do that. It is not worth it. It's not worth going broke over something temporary. Okay, please, I'm begging you. Funny little tidbit for you, since I mentioned credit and stuff. I heard the FICO score, which, as many of you probably know, is your credit score, called the fecal score. In fact, it was presented like this: your FICO score is in fact BS. So, again, I'm not saying credit is evil. I'm not saying credit cards are evil. I'm not saying any of that. Okay, whatever works for you is what works for you. Okay, but I personally do not use credit. I do not borrow money. Okay, because yes, I understand that you can borrow money, and I understand that you can live within your means in that too, and people can make it work. I've seen it happen. I know people very well who have credit cards and they're able to pay them off, and they do not get into debt, and their score is 800, 850, whatever. Great, awesome. But I personally, I do not like to borrow money. If the money is not mine, if it's not in my pocket or in my bank account, I don't use it. I prefer not to. Yeah. So, again, this is just my advice. This is just something that I do. Definitely not something that I'm saying that you should do, but if you're interested, I highly recommend looking into it. It is possible to live without credit. It's possible to live without debt. It's possible to live, within your means and live an okay life, Not like super comfortable. I'm not living in a mansion. I live in a 1-bedroom apartment, right? But I can make the payments and I can afford it. So it is possible to live without debt. It's possible to live without borrowing money. It's possible to go and do the things that you enjoy without having to worry about paying the bill later. Okay? So, all is to say, you can do it too if you really want to. It is possible. And I'm telling you, I am so grateful that I can wake up every day and not have to worry about finances. I can wake up every day and not have to worry about that next bill or that, large number of debt that I owe. It is a great feeling. Like, it is so liberating. And let me tell you something. When you get financial peace, you get peace in your life. So that's my little soapbox talk about finances. To all you nerds out there, I hope you appreciated that. Switching gears, excuse me, switching gears a little bit, in not quite in relation to this particular subject, but something else that I heard recently, as a matter of fact, I've heard over the years, got me to thinking about something recently. In fact, it happened, this came up again a few weeks ago when I was hanging out with some friends, and we were talking about stuff, and somebody brought up the fact, well, let me put it this way. I notice something very peculiar whenever I hang out with certain people. Not everybody, mind you, but certain people that I hang out with, be it at a con or just a house event or like D&D or something like that, doesn't matter. There are certain people I will notice they will censor themselves in front of me. And I don't mean that they don't like talk about off-color jokes or anything like that, because everybody does that in their friend group. We all have six senses of humor, so let's be honest here. No, what I mean by censoring, like, they don't curse as much or cuss as much around me. Like, they won't use naughty words around me sometimes. Or I've had this happen many times. Somebody will say a cuss word or say something in front of me that has a cuss word in it, and then they will immediately turn to me and go, "Oh my gosh, I'm sorry I said that." And I'm like, why are you apologizing to me? Why are you sorry? It's fine. You can speak however you want to. It's no problem. And people on YouTube have also brought this up. Like, Samson doesn't curse. He doesn't cuss. He doesn't say bad words. Well, based on those experiences, I'm going to tell you why that is. And this is going to be some more Samson lore for all of you, because I've pretty much laid it out for you in this entire podcast anyway. I'm going to tell you right now why that is. Okay? So, as many of you know, or maybe you don't, I was raised in a very, I don't want to say it was religious. It was definitely a spiritual household. I'll put it that way. I was raised non-denominational Christian. Okay? And I still hold to those values, just, a little tidbit for you. But, there weren't a lot of bad words being thrown around in my house growing up, and some of you might be listening to this going, oh, well, there's the answer. Well, not really. Well, let me explain why. So, when I was growing up, we couldn't say things like heck. I'm not joking you. We couldn't say heck. We could say gosh, but, my parents kind of frowned upon that still. We couldn't say suck, like, oh, that sucks. We couldn't say that. What else couldn't we say? Heaven forbid you said something like damn or hell or anything like that, because you would be, oh my gosh, yeah, you'd probably get grounded for that. No joke. I remember my parents, actually like punishing me in the sense of like, go to your room, for saying, I think I said, what the hell is this? Even that, like, just saying that there made me kind of cringe a little bit. I said that, and yeah, I was grounded for that. I was very young when I said it, so that always kind of stuck with me. But it was explained to me years later, when I was probably in high school. I had a conversation with my mother about this very thing. I was like, hey, Mom, how come we weren't allowed to say these words, even if they were mild? Like, we couldn't say heck, we couldn't say, the suck word, we couldn't say that kind. And she explained it very well to me. She was actually quite insightful about it. She said, and this is again all based on opinion, so take this with a grain of salt, but it really struck a chord with me. She said, a lot of times you'll hear those words, and those words being cuss words, curse words, they're filler words, you know? It's almost like the speaker, the person saying the words, is using lazy language. I'll never forget her ever saying that. And she said, there are so many words in our vocabulary that we could use to describe something, yet we choose to use vulgarities to describe things. And it's honestly off putting. And I was like, wow, that was very coherent. I'm quite impressed with that answer. And now it wasn't just the fact of like being raised Christian or anything like that. It was, that was part of it, but that was like the core of why we couldn't say those words. Is the fact that my mom, my dad, my grandparents, like all of us, all of the family, basically, wanted their kids to learn the words that you could use instead of just cheap filler words, right? And I just want to throw in a quick disclaimer. I don't care if you curse. Like, I just described. Like, if you listen to this, if you got a sailor mouth, fine, no problem. I don't really care. Speak how you like. Going back to what I described earlier about someone censoring themselves or turning to me and saying that they're sorry for saying those words. I was like, dude, who cares? Talk how you like. I'm not going to call you a lazy speaker for using these words. And that's the disclaimer. I just want to say, because you curse, it's not because I think you're lazy. Okay, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, personally for me, I don't curse, partially because of conviction, but also, conviction being raised, but also because I hold that belief of, yes, there are so many other words out there in our vocabulary, in speech, in grammar, and English, in literature, you name it, like, covering all the bases to use to describe a situation or describe something that you're talking about without using vulgarities. And like I said, it really struck a chord with me and it really resonated with me. So I'm just saying, me personally, I do not curse for that reason, because I believe that there are better words to use. There are better words used to describe things. As a matter of fact, I'm definitely not opposed to cuss words, like, in general. They can be used, right? They can be used to really express things. And believe me, I have used them before, as shocking as that may sound. I've used expletives to describe things before. And it's always quite a shock whenever I do use them in front of people that I know, because everybody looks at me and it's a showstopper. Like, did you just say that? And I'm like, yeah, I did. So sometimes I'll do it just to mess with people, but other times it's because I'm either upset or something happened. Like, for example, I hurt myself at work like about a month ago, and I said a bad word when I stood back up. I was like, and you can imagine what I said. But anyway, I'll leave that to mystery. But yeah, all that to say, I'm not against cuss words. I'm not against curse words. I don't care if you curse. It's just, for me personally, I don't, because I don't like to. I don't prefer to, and there are better words to use, in my opinion, for my own speech. For my own communication. There are other words that I prefer to use that aren't vulgarities, right? So, again, take that with a grain of salt, but I'm only speaking from my experience and from my perspective, because that's all I got. At the end of the day, that's all I can do, is speak from my own perspective on that. So, as a matter of fact, it does result into something funny that happened. I did set up so to those of you who watch me on my Twitch channel, you know that there is a redeem on Twitch that says, I think it's, I can't remember what the exact phrasing of the redeem is, but it's something along the lines of, Samson says a bad word, or Samson speaks badly or something like that, or Samson says a naughty word, but for $20, that's what it says in parentheses. So whenever somebody redeems that, I have to say a cuss word. Like, it's like for 1,000 points or something, 1,000 channel points, and then someone will redeem it, and I have to say a cuss word on stream. So, and I do, and hilarity ensues. Because when you don't cuss normally, when you don't curse normally, it comes off as really funny. It does come off as very funny in the moment because people aren't used to hearing you say that, and it does make for very entertaining moments, I do have to say. So that's another reason that I don't. It's a very small but partial reason, is the fact that when it does happen, it's a showstopper, and it's funny, and it's usually entertaining. So I'm glad I always have that card to play in my back pocket of, oh, hey, I'm going to say something naughty. So you guys ready? Here we go. So, anyway. Oh, I'm going to link this down in the description, but one of my favorite comedy bits of all time, describing this type of thing, like to a T, basically words describing words, comes from George Carlin's 7 Dirty Words That You Can't Say on Television. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with this bit. It is a very famous bit that he did back in the 70s, I believe, and I'll link it in the description, like I said, but yeah, go check that out. He lays it out perfectly. Like, he talks about why some words are bad and others are not, and we use certain words to offend, and then other times we use them as expletives, and sometimes they're used very innocently. And why do we have this, like, differentiation of, different levels, different ways to describe dirty words and all that? So it's brilliant. I highly recommend you click on that link below and check it out. It's like a 5-minute bit, so yeah, I think that will explain better exactly what I'm describing here. But yeah, it's a good time. So if you got a sailor mouth, more power to you. Go for it. If that's part of your personality, go for it. I'm not telling you how to live your life. I'm definitely not telling you how you should talk or speak. That's like the furthest thing. In fact, it's not even on the board of what I'm talking about. So go nuts, by all means, go nuts. But yeah, a little bit more Samson lore for you. I hope that was insightful for you as to why. And I've gotten the question before, so I'm glad to finally answer it. It feels good to talk about it. So here we are. So I think that's going to be the podcast, everybody. We've didn't cover a full hour, but I'm going to say close enough, So hope you enjoyed this little deep dive into the life of Samson just a little bit more, and hope that you enjoyed what you heard. If you did, feel free, consider leaving a like. Feel free to leave a comment if you have any questions or anything that you want to talk about. Yeah, I would love to hear from you. That would be wonderful. But real quick, we are going to check and see if we have anything from last week. Okay, so I just checked because I'm not prepared for this, but I just checked and don't see any particular questions from last week. But if you have any questions or anything that you'd like to know, feel free to put them in the comments below or send me an email via the email address in the description. I would love to hear from you. It'd be lovely. So yeah, I'm going to try and make that a regular thing, answering questions and, any advice that any of you need or anything that you'd like to talk about, feel free to put it in the comments and I will do my best to address it in the next podcast. But yeah, so I think that's going to do it. But I want to thank you again for listening. Thank you for indulging me in this, and really appreciate you stopping by and having a listen. So yeah, it's always a pleasure getting to do this for you all, and I've said it before and I'll say it again, like, the fact that I get to do this is just an absolute blessing, and not that I have to, but that I get to every day. It's just the joy that you all show and share here and on the main channel and other social media platforms. I just want you to know that it means a great deal to me, and I do not let it go, and I want to thank you profusely for all the love that you've shown. It just really means the world to me. And on that same note, just remember the Latin phrase, sic parvis magna. Remember greatness from small beginnings. Remember where you started and where you came from. Remember those who brought you up and those who continue to stand by you today. There is greatness in every step. either created by you or whether you find it along the way, your journey is far from over. And though your beginnings may have been humble, just remember that your journey is continuing on, and it will continue for as long as you let it. So don't give up. The world needs you just as you are. No one can ever take that from you, and no one can ever tell you who you can and can't be or what you can and can't do. So be you, be yourself. You are unique. There has been no one like you in this world ever. There's never been anyone like you in the past. There's no one like you right now, and there won't be anyone like you in the future. So live your best life and be the best that you can be today. And that is simply being plainly and unapologetically you. You got this, and I believe in you. So I want to thank you all for listening. Thank you for all of your support once again. And until next time, my fluffy and unfluffy friends, this is Samson Kitty Fox bidding you adieu, and I will catch you in the next episode. Bye-bye. Bye. Meow meow.